It is the 29th of July. It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
Yes.
Goodness.
We're there.
July.
You know how it goes. Eventually, once school starts again, I'll probably know what day it is. But until then, that's kind of a fool's errand. Regardless, I am Jamie Steyer Johnson. I'm alongside Tyler DeLuca today here on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. And Tyler, you had an experience last night in the house for Dallas Wings taking on
yes, ma'am,
the New York Liberty. And yes, Brianna Stewart out for the Liberty. Shorthanded.
Every time I go to Dallas.
Shorthanded for the team. I mean, not just Stewie out, but Niara Sabally and Kennedy Burke.
Yeah.
That hurts a little bit for sure.
Yeah.
But man, Dallas was ready to take advantage no matter who I think was out there on the floor, no matter what players, no matter what team was on the other side. They were locked in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's certainly one way to put it. I mean, that first quarter, I felt like I blinked and they were up by like 15. And like, that is not something we've seen from Dallas at all this season. Like, it just hasn't happened. So to see, and what was probably their best win of the season, I would say, even though like obviously you have the players out for New York, like you still have to go out there and win the game. And New York has so much talent and depth on this team that is still a very good New York team that they just went and beat. And they kind of stumbled to the finish line a little bit in that fourth quarter and in that second half, where New York kind of brought the zone out and made things a little bit more difficult. But goodness, I mean, that first half was just absolutely phenomenal. Arike has like a double-double with assists in the first half alone. She was phenomenal in this game. She had 14 assists, which was tying a franchise record for a single game assist. Like, just a ridiculous Arike game that genuinely, like, I don't know off the top of my head, but like, just at that initial reaction to the game and everything, I'm like, this is one of the best Arike games I've seen in a Dallas uniform. And it wasn't the most like insanely explosive. It wasn't the most highlight driven, but just in terms of like the totality of her performance, that was one of the best Arike games I've seen in the WNBA. She certainly has had her massive moments in the WNBA, obviously in college as well, if you thought the entire career. But I was incredibly impressed by Dallas. And again, even though New York is shorthanded, you still have to go and play the game. You still have to go and take advantage of that idea of being shorthanded. And they absolutely did that in a massive way in that first half, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's a lot of justification to say that that's one of the best games we've seen from Arike as a pro. I think that people forget a little bit of how rocky her tenure in Dallas has been, just as far as consistency of the roster as a whole. Every time they bring in some pieces that seem like they should make her job a little bit easier, it should bring her some support. There's just been so many injuries and general inconsistencies where building chemistry with teammates and then a team as a whole has been really difficult for her. And so a lot of what we've seen, I think, is her doing what needs to be done, but isn't necessarily the ideal situation for her, for the team as a whole, where, you know, she's been having to shoulder a lot of the load. And people like to talk about, oh, well, she's so inefficient. She's so this, she's so that. Well, for most of her time there hasn't been a second choice. And so we've seen now where, okay, she's settled in, the rest of the team has settled in. You have all these new faces that are new to the team, new to the league, that are, I mean, this is going to sound, I think, kind of shady, but I do not mean it in any negative way whatsoever. They're kind of the island of misfit toys. Like, you have a third-round draft pick, you have a couple of mid-season signings in Grace Berger and Haley Jones, and these are players that are not just sitting on your bench. These are players that are contributing significant minutes, significant stats. And so she is able to go out there and now I think knows what her role is. They know what they're trying to do, and it ends up with, as you said, tying the franchise record for assists in a game, setting a career high for herself in assists in a game, the first player ever to have 15 points and 10 assists in a half in WNBA history. Like, I mean, all of these things are absolutely incredible. The passes she was making, the vision she was showing, what I noticed most about the Wings was they seemed really decisive. The ball was
Hmm.
not getting stuck. No one was sitting there overthinking things. They were as a whole, as a group, thinking one or two moves ahead. Where
Hmm.
as soon as they got the ball, if their shot wasn't there, if their attack wasn't there, they knew exactly where they were going. And I mean, they were able to just get New York reeling.
Yeah, no, I think to me the biggest thing that stands out is Enrique, right, especially for her performance, is yes, the assists are fantastic, 100%, absolutely. Only one turnover. So to be able
Hmm.
to be on the ball like that, and Enrique has always been a home run swinger, whether that be with her passes, her shots, and a whole lot of times she goes yard, like and those home runs work because she is that capable of a player. But in a game like this where I think the biggest takeaway to me, and this is something that was said in the post game press conference from Chris McClonis, is that she's making the simple decision, and I think that coincides with your point about being decisive as well, where it's like she's making the simple decisions. Then the player that comes next, whoever is receiving the ball, is making a decisive decision. That adds up. That adds up a lot. And you have a team that only has 10 turnovers in the entire game, which is pretty solid in its own right. And then again, you have players that has certainly been turnover prone, and I do certainly agree with you that yes, Enrique has her faults in terms of whether it be efficiency or turnovers, but in a whole lot of ways, there hasn't been many other options, and that is better than whatever the outcome of Enrique having the ball is, and during her tenure in Dallas and during her pro career. So I think that it certainly hasn't been like perfect in wins and losses, but I do think that since the All Star break, we're kind of starting to see like not that it maybe is the long term move, but the potential of what Enrique and Paige long term could look at as a long term duo in Dallas. This game is exactly what you're looking for in that 20 points from both. You get an efficient 20 from both in that way. 7 to 15 from Enrique, 7 to 12 from Paige. You don't really see Paige like in your head. I think you would imagine Paige being the one that goes and gets the high assist total, like just generally speaking. But really, as long as somebody's doing it, it works out. And again, I would normally assume that to be Paige, but Enrique is not an incapable passer or playmaker by any means of the word. It just hasn't always formulated in an efficient way. And so to see that at such a high mark, obviously you're not expecting her to go and get 14 assists every game, but just in general, the blueprint of what it could look like if Dallas decides to roll with Enrique and Paige, like these are our two that we are going to build around for the long term, and it's not just Paige and whatever rookie that they draft in and presumably in the lottery of this season. I was incredibly impressed by this. And again, this is to your point, a team, a lineup that has been shifting all around, that is consistently moving and changing in terms of their starting lineup and trying to figure things out. And I think that is the right decision for them to do, to figure out what you have on this roster right now. But it doesn't lean into consistent winning basketball in the sense of like you have to figure this thing out, and that's okay. Like that's not you're not set at all in what this Dallas Wings roster is going to be, both in the now and in the future, and that is okay, and that is exactly what they should be testing and figuring out right now. But to see again this kind of growing connection that we're seeing a little bit more between Paige and Enrique, and it was certainly something that was highlighted in the post game press conference with both of them there and Chris Clonis as well. It's encouraging. Again, is it the long term decision that you want to make and how you want to build? I don't think that we're there to answer that question one way or the other yet. But if you are leaning towards that being the yes, this game is like the perfect blueprint archetype of what you want these two to look like when they are playing with each other and when they are playing in the minutes without the other and the others on the bench as well. I think is another big point from what I take away from this win against Liberty.
And I think that the thing that I've really stuck to with bringing in some new faces, as I said, Haley Jones, Grace Berger, both of them
Hmm.
being midseason signings, I think that there's been a really good focus on having a lot of different options, having a lot of different looks, and being able to say, all right, sometimes Grace is going to be able to push the pace and pull Arike and or Paige off ball. Same with Haley Jones, but obviously both of those are great on ball players in
Hmm.
Arike and Paige. And so they create for themselves, they create for their teammates, and they have found consistent additional options. And so a team can't just say, well, we have this one defensive scheme and that's all we're going to do, because Dallas has successfully found different options. Now,
Yeah.
they're not always going to perform that well across the board
Mhm.
night in and night out. But to have, I mean, it almost reminds me of Golden State, where they've brought in so many different players and been
Mhm.
successful. Now, that's to like the most absurd degree.
Yeah, right.
Here, they still, I think, have had to take some time to figure out what exactly they're trying to do. But to come in later in the season and be able to bring in these players who, for Haley had been on some other rosters, Grace had been bounced around a little bit
Mhm.
this year, last year, all that. And to say, all right, we are going to play you. We're not just bringing you in as a practice player
Yeah.
and find the pieces that fit. It's really, really difficult. And to do that, especially in the year where basically anyone that's a veteran is a free agent next year,
Mhm.
well, finding some people that are young, finding some people that haven't really found anywhere else to stick yet, it's going to give you some options. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, I think that it's probably a little late in the game for them to be making a serious playoff push, more
Yeah.
than likely. But what they are finding long term is major.
Yeah. No, I'm completely with you. I think the biggest thing that I'm interested in, and it's certainly more of a looking ahead to the future and like this year's draft and as well. Like obviously I think Lauren Betts is, the obvious prized big in this draft. But the performances of their bigs this like in this kind of recent stretch, some of these like random what not random signings, but like not players you would think that might be like your kind of long term looking pretty good. Some of these bigs in this rotation have been looking pretty good. Where you look at a player that maybe, especially if you decide to move on from Arike, like there's so many guards and slash kind of threes that are in your really kind of whole lottery range, and then it's Lauren Betts as your big,
Mhm,
right? And so like if you are able to find, I think that's what I'm really looking for in terms of what you can find for the future going forward is that if you can feel comfortable with your rotation of bigs, that is going to be massive just in terms of feeling comfortable whether it's an AZ Fudd, an Olivia Miles, a Flaugy Johnson, like drafting one of those players instead of Lauren Betts because you don't feel like tethered to the need of drafting a center is something that provides, and maybe you still feel like you want Lauren Betts, and that's okay too, because Lauren Betts is a damn good basketball player. But it's just the idea of not feeling like you are absolutely 100% tied to the need of going and finding a big in the draft. Or, I mean, obviously free agency to your point as well. This is going to be a ton of free agents on the board in that way as well. So, again, I just think the more that they can learn about this roster, what you have going forward. Again, I don't think that next year they're just going to turn into some title contender or anything, but I think that this was a fantastic game in terms of I think that this game is probably the best form of the wings that we get from this roster in terms of your stars playing well, your role players playing well. Like there was just a lot to like across the board from this team, and what I think was their best performance of the season. Again, even though they kind of stumbled to the finish line a little bit at the end of that fourth quarter, I still think overall the takeaway is that in a perfect world with this roster right now, this is what you look like at probably at arguably your best. What do you want to change in that? What do you want to keep from that going forward? I think that this provides a great ceiling to look at in their current form that I don't know if they had before. I think they had a lot of games where you may be able to look at a floor, but being able to have a ceiling, I think, is really important to your projection going forward
mhm.
and what you want and what you need in this roster going forward. So this game again, yes, it's a great win in the present. It's a sign of growth in the present, but it really might be a massive games in terms of the projection going forward as well for what this Wings franchise wants to look like as they continue to build their roster and have a very important draft potentially coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the bigs. I want to just quickly mention as well that I keep talking about, the midseason signings of Grace
Mhm.
Berger, Haley Jones, Louisa Geiselsuter wasn't here to start the season.
Yeah, she was
Miru
great.
was a move that happened in season as well, and
Mhm.
so there's certainly been some some shakeups on the
Yeah.
roster this season. As we said, it's been kind of Arike's entire tenure there, but they have found some sense of stability now.
Mhm.
I know they're working on getting as many people healthy as possible. Maisha Hines Allen's been in and out. Maddie
Mhm.
Seacrest has been out for most of the season. And then, I mean, obviously Ty Harris missing the season, Page not playing back to backs. It's not going to be 100% consistent at all times, but they have found something, and I don't think it's going to be that sort of carousel going forward here
Yeah.
this season, and more than likely next season. I think they
Mhm.
can maintain a pretty decent core from what they have right now,
Mhm.
even going into next year because of the youth that they have.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
very exciting, super fun game. Just again, anything unexpected, that was not necessarily expected,
No.
by any stretch of the imagination, and so just fun to continue to see teams show us something we maybe didn't realize they had in the tank,
Mhm.
uh, which also I think describes the Los Angeles Sparks,
Yeah.
which we're gonna talk a little bit about what's coming up tonight,
Mhm.
primarily the Aces at the Sparks, because you were able to see the Aces while you were down
Yeah.
in Texas as well. And the Sparks have had some pretty big wins recently and are
Mhm.
adding a decent piece, I think, back in
Call
with
that.
Cameron
Yeah.
Brink making her season debut
Yeah.
tonight against the Aces. And so I mean, look, you want to talk about having some youth, you want to talk about bringing in some different looks, you want to talk about having different options and making moves from the beginning of the season to now. Sparks have done all that. And I tell you what, there were some question marks. There still are,
Mhm.
obviously, but that's a team that is in the playoff hunt and has really put together a string of pretty significant success dating back to right before the All-Star break.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the Liberty, I guess, for being the litmus test for all these teams. Because I mean, the when the Sparks go and have especially that crazy end of the game, with the Liberty and the performance of Rukia Jackson in that game, like, that was that was one of, like, the games where you look at Rukia and you're like, "Goodness gracious." Like, the ceiling that can be. I feel like we don't talk enough about Rukia, about, like, as, like, one of, like, the young players that, like, can and I think generally speaking, the W, I feel like it's usually like year 4 where you're like, okay, like this is relatively speaking what you're going to be
Mhm.
in the WNBA. Like obviously there could certainly be more growth and whatnot, but like generally speaking, like by year 4, like you've settled in, you've had your time, like you had time to develop if you're still on a roster, which is
Your
certainly
team
in
knows who
the
you
W.
are, you know who you
Yeah,
are.
100%. And I can't stop thinking about what year 4 Rakia might look like. And I know that's like way in the head and everything, and like not to do it tonight. But like I was watching that game and I'm like, goodness gracious, like this is a certain type of player that like I don't know if there's many threes in the W like Rakia. Like there's not like I think the small forward position, if you will. I mean, obviously positionless basketball, yeah. Like the general speaking, the three, right? It's not the strongest position in the WNBA. You have a lot of fours that are like the four is incredibly dominant, the five as well. And then like I think you kind of have a unique kind of archetype at the two, with like your Kelsey Plums, your Enriquez, your Kelsey Mitchells, like players of that form. And then you have like your point guards, right? And but the three is not a very like fleshed out like position
It's
group,
not
I
well
feel like.
defined.
No, it's and so like you have like maybe like your Alicia Gray if you count her as a three, like her and Ryan, kind of bounce back and forth between that. But like there's not a whole lot of threes in this league that can go and do what Rakia Jackson is able to do, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, she's just such a fun player. And then now you add Cam Brink back into this mix. And like we just saw it, Dearica Hamby is like the player of the week, I think is what it was in the Western Conference, and like this is a team that is starting to look more like what you anticipated when you go and make that trade for the trade for Kelsey Plum. Like that is starting to become a bit more of a reality here. And now, I mean, I think like some of the biggest weaknesses in terms of like their paint protection and things like that, it's not a weakness if Cam Brink is there and is back healthy. Now, we'll certainly see like what that is going to look like in terms of like the ramp up and how fresh she is and everything in terms of just knocking the rust off and whatnot. But in the perspective of trying to make a playoff push, Cameron Brink solves a lot of issues that this team has, and I'm incredibly excited to see what that could potentially look like. There's certainly I don't know if I call it a logjam, right? But like the fit with like Azare and Hamby and Brink and Rakia all in like one starting lineup is going to be interesting to kind of see what it looks like this year with obviously a new coach coming in and all of that nature. Like I'm very intrigued in what that looks like, or if they kind of maybe that becomes more of a next year problem, and like you kind of like this is more of a ramp up for Brink, the rest of this season. But regardless, you want to talk about surging at the right time. You want to talk about the ability to make a push, and then to bring Cameron Brink back during this stretch of great games. It's perfect timing. If you are going to make a playoff push, like this stretch is what is going to have to be continued throughout a lot of the rest of this season. And adding Cameron Brink back is certainly something that can help you continue to do that. So I'm very intrigued in seeing how good she looks, like just in terms of again knocking that rust off and whatnot, and what role that she ends up playing on the Sparks team early on as she kind of works her way back into the full fold.
And you say with Rakia how just she's a very different player.
Hmm.
How the three position you have the opportunity to do kind of whatever you can play to your strengths
Hmm.
because as you said, it's not a very clearly defined role, and that's something that I think is in a lot of ways related to the difference in how people play in college versus the pros,
Hmm.
where you have a lot of people that play the five in college that shift over to the four
Hmm.
in pros. You have a lot of people that play kind of the four in college that maybe shift to the three as a pro, but that's a really big jump a
Hmm.
lot of the time as far as the way that you play, the way that you defend. And so you have this sort of position that's almost a catch all where maybe you're the defensive stopper, or maybe you're a great shooter, or maybe you're a great slasher, or, this or that or this.
Hmm.
And Rakia does a lot of things really well
Yeah.
and is able to play inside, is able to play outside. And I think that's like the ideal archetype of the three, but it's just not something that we see a whole lot.
Hmm.
And when we do see it, a lot of times they end up being sort of slotted into the four because of how difficult of a position and how important of a position that is. So
Yep.
to have that depth with currently or previously this season, Dearica Hamby and the height of Azare Stevens, it allows Rakia to kind of slot around wherever she
Hmm.
has an advantage. When you then add Cameron Brink in there, it just, I think, exacerbates that opportunity and gives Azare Stevens more ability
For sure.
to slot around and
Hmm.
to expose people with her tremendous height, with her athleticism, and her ability to stretch the floor. And
Hmm.
so I'm very, very intrigued by the Sparks team, especially to have Sanaya Fagan getting solid minutes and then bringing Cameron Brink back.
Yeah.
You can really slow your roll. You can put her in for the time that she's able to go safely and productively, but you're on a winning streak without her.
Yeah.
So you don't have this constant pressure. It's we've talked about with the Fever and Caitlin Clark is that when you have success without this player there, the pressure is off for them to rush back and I need to go, be the superhero.
Hmm.
That's not the role that Cam Brink is being put in. Like
Hmm.
she's going to be an addition to an already fairly solid team that has really found their footing. And so
Yeah.
that's where I'm very intrigued. I know, people will have reasonable, unreasonable expectations. People are going to think what they're going to think, but I hope she's given obviously the grace to come back with
Hmm.
the patience that's needed and with the time to kind of find her footing again. But obviously the potential to get herself back on track and to be able to get integrated this year as opposed to having to wait for another whole new season,
Hmm.
I think is really big and obviously just always good to see people return from injury.
Yeah, no, I think it's massive for them. Just again to the I think that's a great point of like getting Brink back this year. And presumably, like if she was in Unrivaled last year, I would imagine that that would be a place that she can play. Like by the time that we get to the beginning of next year, Cameron Brink, uh, under an assumption, is going to be fully back. And but if they're able to get if that ramp up is obviously it was a pretty extended period for like what we have kind of grown accustomed to when it comes to the injury that she had. So I'm interested in like just like how that changes, what that might look like in terms of like how fast she can knock the rust off, like for better or for worse. Like what I'm just intrigued in kind of this whole timeline that now that we're gonna see with Brink. But I do think the ability to come in and just not kind of just slot in and like just be a part of this team and to your point, not have to try and save the team, quote unquote, is great for her, and what I'm excited to see tonight with the Sparks as a whole and just how she looks.
And let's kind of round it out here
Yeah.
with their opponent, obviously a
Yeah.
team that you were able to see and who you want to talk about ups and downs. That's kind of been the story of the season for the Las Vegas Aces.
Hmm.
Had a really great showing against Dallas. Dallas played without Paige Beckers, but I think that even outside of that, it's hard to say that that wasn't a pretty successful game for
Yeah.
the Aces when you're able to score 106 points, when you're scoring pretty consistently throughout the game, when you get massive, massive production from unexpected sources.
Yeah.
I'll say switching up the starting lineup and having Kirsten Bell out there saying, "Hey,
Hmm.
we're gonna go big. We have to be able to shoot the three. We have to shoot more threes." I felt like there were a lot of signs that Vegas is switching things up and paying attention to some of the analytical things that have been
Hmm.
pointed out. And again, one game, small sample size, but it at least shows what individuals are capable of, what teams are capable of. I'm
Hmm.
really interested to see what they do in the next outing after something like that. Just a very different look than we've seen so far this season for the Aces.
Yeah, no, it was incredibly interesting to see because to your point, like this is not like when they said, okay, if you tell me Jewel Lloyd is not gonna start, okay, cool. I can kind of see a vision. It sounded like she had kind of had the conversation with Becky like kind of
Mhm.
on her own. So like that was obviously like it wasn't some like okay, you're getting yanked, like this is and that nature. I would have not have. I don't know if Kirsten Bell would have initially been my first pick. Like
Probably
really
wouldn't have
wasn't.
been my second, maybe not my third.
Like and to say that she goes and plays phenomenal basketball. Like, yes, like obviously, you're not expecting her to drop 19 every game at all, but you don't really need her to. Like in a
Mm-mm.
perfect world, right? It's the little things, and that's what that was really complimentary of in that Aces press conference was that it was everything else. Like, yeah, the scoring is great, and like obviously, Jewel Lloyd going and it, doing what she did, scoring 20 off the bench, in only 19 minutes. Like that's like this was quite possibly you want to talk about kind of how we were talking about with Dallas, like the perfect outcome of like what you have. This felt like the perfect outcome of like what the Aces have to offer. Like you have great scoring from Jewel Lloyd. You have a starter that is now like contributing in that way. Again, is this the expectation? Like even Becky was like, "Look, if you're telling me this is what I'm getting every game, like I will be happy the rest of this season." But I don't think that there's any expectation that this is going to be what you're getting every game. But in terms of just like the one game sample size, you saw why it added up in the sense of like Kirsten Bell was doing the little things. If you just even completely take out the scoring out of the equation, she's just like around constantly whenever she's on the court. And again, you're not asking her. I don't think there's probably going to be many games where she takes more shots than Asia Wilson, and that be a positive thing. So I again, in terms of the scoring, I'm not even worried about that. I'm looking at the other things, and like she didn't like stuff the stat sheet in any other stat, but it felt like she never felt like she was like a negative on the court, right? And frankly, for the Aces at times, that's enough, especially when you have Asia Wilson and you have especially and if Jackie Young's playing the way that she did in that game, where she was phenomenal and just showed like the entire bag with the passing, the scoring, the shooting on all three levels. Anything you want from Jackie Young, it was all there. But to me, the biggest takeaway is Jewel Lloyd, 6 of 11, 20 points. It's a thing that it just kind of made sense to try this. And to me, you allow her to be in lineups without Asia Wilson, and you allow her. You brought in Jewel Lloyd to put up shots, but do you want any player eh, almost in the league taking away shots from Asia Wilson? No. And so like I think that had been a kind of been a struggle to find that balance of like, yes, Jewel, we want you to shoot, but we also have Asia Wilson. And so putting her in lineups without Asia and where she is running the second unit, whether it's alongside a Chelsea or a Jackie, or if she is like kind of like the lone member of the quote unquote core four that is in the lineup at the time, and you just allow Jackie to play free to go and get shots up. I think it took a little. It was a little bit of a slow start for her in this game, but once she kind of saw that first shot go down, like it was smooth sailing from there. And I'm really interested in what that could potentially look like going forward in the sense of like you just tell Jackie to go out there and go be an offensive weapon because that is what you get excuse me, to get Jewel in for. That's what you do. Is to bring Jewel in to be an offensive weapon. And obviously it hasn't been an incredibly dangerous weapon over the course of his season so far. But this change, just kind of having the freedom, I think it was just a simpler offensive system. Just like when you had like kind of those two designated times, and obviously Jewel played with Asia on the court as well, and you could still do that. That is not something you just have to completely abandon by any means. But I was super impressed, and again, an initial switch that I mean, whether it been like an Elliot Nye potentially to help space the floor for Asia Wilson or whoever, like that was not the starter I expected. If you had told me you're taking Jewel Lloyd out, but this is why they paid Becky Hammon the big bucks, I guess, because it worked out great. We'll see how it kind of continues to work. But the initial return and just that one game sample size, like you genuinely, I want to say you couldn't have asked for more. I don't think you would have even asked for this. It was that good.
Mm-mm.
Like it's just not. I mean, incredible performance, and what you more than enough of what you wanted to see when you make that switch.
In a way, almost feels like a dress rehearsal for seeing the
Mm,
sparks
mhm.
because part of what Kirsten Bell brings to the starting lineup is her height,
Yeah.
being 6'6'1", and being able to really stretch out to the perimeter. And so, as we talk about this Sparks team that has this height, that has this length, where you're going to be starting, presumably continuing to start Dearica Hamby and Azrae Stevens
Mhm,
and Rakia Jackson, like she can match up height wise with some of those players
mhm.
better than, especially Jewel Lloyd, or I mean, if Dana Evans were the one to slot in, that
Yep.
would be a massive height disadvantage. And so I think that in a way that makes sense as well to do that against the team where, okay, we have different options on how we're going to match up against them like they did against the Wings.
Mhm,
But you need to have a little bit more of that height against the Sparks, ideally. Um, Kirsten Bell also, I mean, obviously has been a talking point this year and last year for the time she's gotten, lack
mhm,
of time she's gotten. And again, her contract has been guaranteed. And so whatever people want to say, there's not a lot of flexibility there.
yeah,
And so for her to continue working, had really struggled with her shot for a while
mhm,
and has come in and been able to knock some shots down, especially in this game, but in a couple other games this year as well. 19 points is more than she scored in the entirety of last season. Like, that doesn't just happen because you got the time
mhm,
in the game. That happens
mhm,
because you're continuing to work, because you're proving to your coach that you can be trusted, go out there and continue to work hard. And so, she's one of the people that I think has had kind of the toughest go of it media wise over the
mhm,
past couple years. And so I'm happy to see her go out there and get a really, really solid game. Hopefully that's something she can string together. That'd be huge for the Aces, obviously, to have another contributor where my biggest criticism of them has been, yeah, you can find stars, you can bring in those stars, but they've mostly failed to secure and develop role players, and
mhm,
that's what you need. You can't just have all diamonds. Like you got to have some of that like glue that's holding them
mhm,
together, right? Like now I'm going to go into my jeweler stuff. Like you got to have the diamonds, then you got to have
mhm,
the settings, like the metal
mm,
that the
mhm,
diamonds go into. Like you can't just be walking around with a handful of stones. Like you need the support. You need the base level, and that's what they've been missing. And that's what I mean. If Kirsten Bell can do that, if she can go out there and she can take 5 shots a game, if she can go out there and she can play defense, if she can get rebounds, like stretch the defense a little bit. If you
yeah,
shoot 35% from three, that's probably not bad considering the
yeah,
way the Aces have shot this year across the board.
mhm,
So I'll be very interested to see what her minutes look like going forward, whether that's kind of a flash in the pan or something that's in any way sustainable,
mhm,
and especially because that makes it so much easier to continue to bring Jewel in as sort of that firecracker coming
mhm,
in off the bench.
mhm,
So I don't know. I'm excited. I think that the Sparks are a really great team to see another challenge for
Mhm.
this Aces team where, yeah, it's a very solid team that's been playing extremely well lately, but they're not the pinnacle of the W right now.
Mhm.
Like they've had their ups and downs as well. And so there's definitely ways you can go out there and take advantage of it. You have a lot of experience. And so I think it'll be interesting one way or
Yeah.
the other. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, I'm ready for it. I'm excited. Again, I think there's a whole lot of teams that like again in a time where the rosters are relatively finalized, like we're kind of getting to that point of the season where like you're not seeing as many moves and everything. Um, it's been fun to kind of see like now you've had half this season, like you relatively are becoming what you are going to be for this year, and as we are kind of entering that phase, I feel like we're seeing more teams on the up than on the down, and that's super intriguing to me to kind of see. Again, give it 2 or 3 weeks. What conversations are we having? I don't know. That's why we gotta play the games. So I'm excited to see again just as we kind of see these trends come out of the All Star break, what is real and what is kind of a more of a flash in the pan for these teams.
Absolutely. Well, lots to think about from past
Mhm.
games, lots to watch obviously here going forward.
Mhm.
And we'll have a handful of them tonight. We mostly obviously discussed the Aces and Sparks, but also getting the Valkyries at the Dream and the Sky at Mystic. So a very stacked slate, but not overwhelming,
Mm-mm.
fortunately. Having actually a digestible group of games
It's
is
nice.
always nice. So we
Nice.
appreciate the W doing that every once in a while. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. You can find Tyler at Tyler DeLuca, pretty much wherever you're looking on social
Mhm.
media. You can find me at J Steyz, JSTEYZ. Make sure you're following along with Her Hoop Stats on all of those platforms, as well as subscribed to our newsletter, sending out a whole bunch of really terrific written content, as Tyler kind of alluded to, continuing to solidify these rosters as the trade deadline approaches next week. And then obviously free agent signings can continue through the end of the regular season. But if we're going to see any blockbuster moves, it's going to be imminent
Mhm.
here. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We will certainly be making sure that you are up to date on that. And we will be back here daily the rest of the week on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Thanks for listening.